The basketball show is back, getting ready for another weekend of college basketball. Some things change, some things don't change. She never does. That's Taylor Korn. I'm still here, looking like I always do. Jim Dunaway, ready for another big weekend of basketball. A lot to get to on this show. Taylor, we're going to talk about Auburn now, starting to get into the discussion of the one of the best college basketball teams ever. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about panic button in Alabama. We'll talk about the SEC bubble trouble. We'll preview Bama hosting Kentucky and Auburn hosting Georgia. But a couple of afterthoughts from the games we saw earlier this week. It comes from a couple of our viewers. One of them, I will winning, asked you the best five you could have on the floor for Auburn at a given time right now. So I guess the scenario I would paint as we start off the conversation tonight is games on the line. Which five players do you want on the floor for the Auburn Tigers? We'll say for the national championship. They need a big run in the last 4 minutes. Which five are you running out there in San Antonio?
See, this is the thing. If we need points scored, I have my five. But if we
Yeah,
need stops, I have another five. And if it's one of those situations where you're subbing in and out based on, if you're trying to play defense or if you're on the offensive side of the court, I think offensively, if a game is down to the wire, Tahaad is someone that I feel very confident with the ball in his hands because he has not shown one time this season. I mean, he didn't have a great shooting night on Wednesday night when they hosted Arkansas, but when the lights are brightest, that's why I call him primetime Pettiford. He's hit a lot of big shots. He hit a couple big shots in Tuscaloosa. You go back to the beginning of the season, the Houston game. So he's someone that I feel very confident in at the end of a game, and if it's down to crunch time, I guess we can call it.
right.
Janai, of course, you want Janai on the floor.
Couldn't believe you didn't go with him first. Oh, but
Well,
I understand. Yes,
I he's either way. He's a lock. He's on the court no matter
that's right.
what you need to happen. Defense. So where I start to waver is Denver. Okay, actually no, I'm not wavering. Denver. I want Denver Jones on the court. His defense, especially as of late, has been incredible. He doesn't turn the ball much over. He doesn't really foul much either. So I feel like he's a safe bet. And he can hit big shots. He
Right.
also went through a little bit of a dry spell a couple games ago, but he has found his shot again. Chad, he just pisses you off defensively. You talked about that a couple, I don't
Forever.
know when it
Yeah.
was,
Oh,
but
every show.
yeah, he will just piss you off defensively. And then I don't know if this will be shocking or not, but Chaney and Dylan doesn't produce a ton offensively or really much at all at times. Rebounding, does a great job, but I think I would go with Chaney here
You
because
got to. You got to. That guy's hot right now, man.
he is. But then you think of Dylan's going to be more likely to block a shot, but he'll also be more likely to foul in the process. So I'll go with Chaney as my fifth guy. But I had such a hard time doing this because I feel like there are a lot of different combinations, and you can't really go wrong with a number of different guys. But I think that's who I would feel most confident in.
Yeah. I will winning. I will tell you that I would have had the same five, Cheney and Janai, Pettiford, um,
Chad
I'd
in Denver.
Chad Baker-Mazara. I'd go Miles Kelly over Denver. That would be me.
You would?
Yeah, just a little back and forth there. I mean, if it's a 2 minute stretch, bang, bang, no really substitutions. Not that he asked, but I'll throw my Alabama guys out here real quick. Mark, obviously, I'd go Aden Holloway over Phylon. I'd go Youngblood, even though he hadn't been there the last couple of games. I'd go Grant Nelson, though he hadn't been there the last couple of games. And then I would decide between Cliff and Mo, and I would probably go Mo Diabate
No.
out there. Yeah, I'd go with Mo, and you'd be a little undersized probably, but those are the five that I think I trust the most right now. But Philon's coming on, but Alabama's got to get it right soon. So we'll talk about Bama in a second. But I want to open up this because not that I'm taking the Georgia game for a win for Auburn. We'll preview that at the end of the show, but it does seem like a little chance for Auburn to we can catch our breath here, or a little breath here before it gets down to the juiciest part of the end of the schedule and then postseason. But there is discussion now. Even Bruce is talking about one of the better regular season teams of all time now. He said it with Van Pelt last night on Sports Center. I saw the Field of 68 guys debated earlier this week. I've seen some folks from Yahoo Sports debate this on whether or not this Auburn team, if they were to end up being national champions, could they rank among the greatest teams of all time? They would be in that discussion. Let me first just say, historically, we can't go all the way back into the 60s and 70s and the 50s and 40s and 30s and 20s. So the greatest teams of all time probably will always be 1972, 1973 UCLA with John Wooden, 1976 Indiana. They were 30 and 0, 32 and 0, those type teams, 33 and 1. Basketball was different back there. I'm even going to take out the discussion, though I think Auburn would fit into these discussions of great teams from the 90s. I would throw 92 Duke in there, Latrell and Hurley, 96 UK with Patino and Tony Delk and those guys, 94 Nolan Richardson in Arkansas with Corliss Williams. So to me, the discussion becomes modern day basketball 2000 on, but I'd even throw Auburn in the mix for the 90s. I think Auburn, if they win it all, can get into the discussion to be debated because that would put them up there with these 34 and 2, 35 and 2 type teams with a national championship. Bruce is only talking regular season right now. I'm interested when I bring this subject up. First of all, does your heartbeat increase? Do you start to perspire a little bit on the forehead? And do you like this discussion at all? Because even Bruce is talking about it a little bit right now.
I don't, honestly. I mean, I think it's inevitable. And if people that have been covering the sport for a long time don't think that that's a crazy statement and think it's a topic worth being discussed, then it's going to be discussed. It just makes me nervous because I'm superstitious in the sense of I never like to get too high on a team because I feel like that's when I set myself up to be disappointed. But that's just a me problem. It does make me nervous though. I don't know why. I guess just because of superstition, but it's also so hard because I went back and started to look at records that they've broken, so far this season, and it's hard to compare, one team to another when you're playing maybe in different conferences, different seasons because the competition is so different. So for example, people have been talking for a couple weeks now about how many quad one wins Auburn has. And it is insane. But then at the same time, it's like how many other elite teams of the past, first off, quad one wins haven't always been a thing. And
Right.
second off, how many opportunities did they have? Because the SEC being as strong as it is right now gives Auburn the opportunity to add to that number. So you can't always, when it comes to conference play, you can't control your opponents. You have more of a say in that in your non-conference schedule. But when it comes to conference play, I think, that's obviously helped Auburn's quad one win numbers because of the number of elite teams in the SEC this season. So it's hard for me in my head to compare because I feel like there's no baseline because there are so many variables that change from season to season. You know what I'm saying?
100%. To your point, one team that I would throw into the conversation would be 2007 Florida with Al Horford and those guys. And I feel like those two back-to-back national champions reminded me a lot, Billy Donovan's team, of this Auburn team. But the SEC top to bottom wasn't as strong as this SEC is. To your point, they didn't have the opportunity to play as many quad one games and probably doesn't measure up. They didn't have Ken Palm back then. They didn't have quad one wins. So it's very different. But that's one team I think you look at 2007 Florida and you go, okay, well, if Auburn was to win a national championship, maybe you start talking about 2007 Florida. Also from the SEC, 2012 Kentucky, 38-2. Anthony Davis's team there with Calipari, great national champions. I think they beat everybody in that NCAA tournament by more than 8 points, 9 points. It was not close in any of the games. Then you get to a Duke team in 2001 with Shane Battier, 35-4. Tyler Hansborough's North Carolina team in 2009, 34-4. 2008, Mario Chalmers, Kansas, 37-3. Auburn can get all those numbers, but the Ken Palm wasn't around back then, and this is what is crazy. This is where I think the conversation really jumped off for me this week. Since November 27th, Auburn has been number one in Ken Palm all but 1 week. So, I mean, this has almost been coast to coast for Auburn as the dominant number one team. They've been number one in the AP poll since January 13th. By the way, no team not named Kentucky in the SEC history has ever been number one this many weeks in a row. Only Kentucky has. And at some point, Auburn will close in on that gap if they keep going on. But here's the one that I think gets it into the conversation. I want you to react to this. They are one of the most efficient offenses in Ken Palm history right now. And we know what their defense is. So if their defense is elite and they're one of the most efficient offenses in Ken Palm history, not just this year, but in Ken Palm history, I know that's not forever, but that probably translates through the history of time. And I think that's where this thing is jumping off a little bit here.
Yeah, that's something that I was going to bring up was the offensive efficiency numbers from Ken Palm because, like you said, that is something that can translate, to the start of Ken Palm. Obviously, not to the start of college basketball, but they at one point had the highest rated offense. Obviously, it changes, very frequently, but they had the highest rated offensive efficiency since the birth of Ken Palm. There was another stat that I saw on Twitter. It was from Evan Maya. I don't know if I say that right, but y'all know what that is. Teams with the most wins over top 40 teams, according to the Evan Maya rankings, at this point in the season, Auburn led that with 12. They tied for the lead with the 2019 Kansas team. 2023 Purdue had 11. 2017 Baylor had 11. 2020 Kansas. 2020 Baylor, 2017 Kansas all had 9. So that was something else that was in comparison to previous teams. And then something else that I read was this was from December 15th. So a hot second ago. On December 15th, Auburn's net efficiency rating, which was 35, was the highest any team has been at that point in the season by far. The next best was 31.4. That dates back to 2011 and 2012. So that's a decent chunk of time. And then the number of records that they've broken in Auburn history, which that's not, step away from the national comparison and just look at what they've done in terms of Auburn. Are the standards that high? Not necessarily. But when you look back years down the road at the Auburn record books, you're going to see a lot of this team.
That's right. But history will remember them and why you hate having this discussion right now by what they do in the NCAA tournament, right?
Exactly.
Great regular season. If you don't make it out of the first weekend, if you don't make it to the Final Four, maybe if you don't even win the national championship, it'll feel like something's left on the table, especially when it comes to you being compared to the greatest teams of all time, because all the ones we mentioned are national champions. But that's the discussion that Auburn has earned so far, and they get ready to play Georgia this weekend. Real quickly on Auburn, Georgia, we'll preview them right here. Down at Neville again. This Georgia team was really good early, and they seem to have hit a wall. The schedule is tough. Now they're playing the best team in the country on the road. This doesn't match up well for Georgia. Um, I don't see a path to victory here for them. The point spread to me will be somewhere around 16 and a half, much like it was against Arkansas the other night. Auburn didn't cover that one, but Auburn didn't play their best game. When I ask you Auburn, Georgia, thought on that, what do you have?
It's hard to compare their first matchup because Johni Broome was out. That was one of the two games that he was out after he hurt his ankle. So it was a one possession game. It was one of those games where it seemed like Auburn kind of took their foot off the gas after they had a decent lead. They ended up winning 70-68. That was one of the games that Tahaad Pettiford really stepped up in. He led the team. He had 24 points. And this is going to be another one of those teams, a lot like Arkansas, I feel like is desperate for a win. They've lost 4 of their last 5, 8 of their last 10. So you would think that this team would be hungry for a win. That was a message that Bruce sent to the team prior to the Arkansas game is, this Arkansas team is fighting for a NCAA tournament berth. So they're going to be hungry. Y'all can't get complacent. And I feel like this Georgia team's also going to be hungry for a win because they looked good earlier this season. And like you said, they've kind of fallen off. Asen Newell, their star freshman, is averaging 5 points less on the road in conference play than he is at home. So I think
Yep.
that's something that's, interesting. And it's not all that rare, especially when you're looking at a freshman. But I think one thing that Auburn needs to clean up is first off turnovers. After coming off a road game in Tuscaloosa and having 4 total turnovers and then having 3 turnovers in the first 3 minutes of the Oklahoma game or the Arkansas game, sloppy. They had 12 turnovers in total, which is uncharacteristic for the
Yeah, they
most
had
part.
7 in a 10-minute span there the other night against Arkansas. So a big clump of them in about a 10-minute span where they looked really sloppy, but they got over it. They calmed down.
Right. And then assists. They only had 11 assists. They're averaging 18 assists a game. And I think it seemed like they were, I don't know if I want to say forcing shots, but they were kind of rushing it. They weren't moving the ball around a ton. And I don't know how much of it has to do with fatigue. And I'm not talking about just from Saturday. It's a long season. Every team's going to be tired, and especially these SEC teams that are playing elite competition night in and night out. So I don't know what really to link that back to or what to draw a parallel to, or it may have just been an off night. I know that Bruce talked about it after the game in his press conference, and he said, they didn't do a great job sharing the ball, which is typically something that they're good at and something that Bruce has been very happy with throughout the season. So I think from the Auburn side of things, that's what you need to look at.
So that's coming up at 3 o'clock on Saturday. We'll have an Auburn Georgia post game right after that. Then Alabama and Kentucky at 5, more on them in a second. But we got to ask a question by RTR Forever. He says, has everyone figured out Alabama's offense? Particularly after the last 2 games with Auburn and then Missouri sort of um, giving up a lot of points, but having Alabama's number and beating them in back-to-back games. I would say this to RTR Forever before we talk about pressing the panic button for Alabama is that I do feel like that it is so beaten into this team's head, the Nate Oates offense, Taylor, that it's either 3 or at the rim, 3 and at the rim. And Auburn and Missouri, being physical guards, did such a good job on the perimeter. I do feel like maybe there's a space in between the rim and the 3-point line that gives you those 2 points that I think it's the no shoot zone in the Nate Oates offense, and maybe to loosen things up, some nuance they need to find a little common ground there and try to free up that offense a little bit. We'll see what they do on Saturday against Kentucky, but RTR Forever, I don't think the offense is broken, which gets me to this question: is it time to press the panic button for Alabama? My quick answer for that is no, it's not, because we saw what happened last year. I brought this up on the show today, and I said, but I was joking with Brownie. I was like, Brown, it's 2 losses in a row. Can I not panic after 2 losses in a row? And he threw back into my face the quote I used for years. I said this years ago when we first started doing it together. We're such a football minded sports base here in Alabama that we panic over every loss because that's what you do during football season. And basketball is different. There are losses that are built into the cake. And so two losses, but these two losses, particularly against two really good teams in Auburn and Missouri back to back, has got everybody confidence level in this team is down a little bit. So I'm not pressing the panic button, but I am starting to get concerned about consistent offensive performance from people not named Mark Sears, particularly, and I'd love your thoughts on this, Grant Nelson and Chris Youngblood, and a little bit Aden Holloway the last two games. But for me, Grant Nelson and Chris Youngblood, they've sort of offensively gotten out of whack a little bit. And I think Alabama needs to get back into sync with those guys. If I asked you, panic button for Alabama, what do you say?
No, I mean, when you think about it emotionally, it can be demoralizing when you go into a game expecting to win. You're coming off an emotional loss as a fan base and as a player, as for the team. And if you look at it logistically, Missouri was a quad one loss. It was a top 15 matchup. You were playing on the road. And it's not like you lost to a D3 school at home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's not a bad loss. A quad one loss is not a bad loss. Does it hurt? Yes. Does it hurt coming immediately following a emotional win at home? Yeah. But they are still tied for second in the SEC alongside Florida. And all of their dreams, all of their goals are still within reach. So no, I think the thing that I'll be looking at, and I believe it was Lance that said this today on the show, is what's their effort level going to look like? Because defense has been the problem. Defense has been the problem. They scored 98 points in regulation and lost a game.
By
Defense,
12. By 12.
right, right. So defense, and that's nothing new.
Yeah.
Defense being a problem isn't, that's not a recent development. So I think the effort and a lot of, I believe y'all talked about this today as well, a lot of, rebounding, for example, a lot of times that's effort. That's who wants it more, it's a hustle plays. What do they look like? Are they hanging their heads? Or are they going to come out on fire on Saturday when Kentucky is, strolling into Holman Coliseum? Or are they going to look a little beat down? And I think that if they don't look full of energy, if effort isn't there, even if the shots aren't falling, if you don't see a team that looks motivated, that's when I might start. I wouldn't press the panic button, but that's when I might start growing a little bit concerned. That
It's
loss, I don't think should send you, off the rails by any means. But depending on what the effort looks like on Saturday, I think that would determine where they would be on my meter.
Kentucky just happens to be the easiest game left on the schedule. That's how tough it is. Kentucky at home this week, 5 o'clock, will be post game after that one as well, reaction. But it's Kentucky, then Mississippi State at home on Tuesday, at Tennessee the following Saturday, home to Florida at Auburn. State's playing its best basketball of the year. Tennessee is a one seed contender. Florida is a one seed lock. Auburn, number one overall seed, one seed in the tournament. So you have potentially three one seed type opponents and Mississippi State who could play its way onto the two line and Kentucky coming up. That Kentucky preview for me, it starts with Lamont Butler, whether he plays or not. He missed another game with that shoulder injury that continues to nag him, but they still beat Vandy in their midweek game. If I asked you Alabama, Kentucky, I'll go Lamont Butler. Does he play? Does he not play? If he doesn't play, Jackson Robinson, he's got a wrist issue. He's likely not going to play or is questionable. We'll get a report coming out later on Friday and then on Saturday morning on that. Chrissa, they're talking about a red shirt for him, three of their big players down the stretch. So that gets you to Otega Owa, who had 20 against Vandy, and then big 7-footer Amari Williams, who's a problem inside. If I asked you preview Alabama, Kentucky for me, um, Give me one thought on where you think Alabama is going against Big Blue here.
Well, this is unrelated to the game in itself, but I did see something earlier. Someone posted about it on Twitter. I can't remember who. And so I went and looked for myself to confirm this is true. Alabama, as of a couple hours ago, as of LeBaron File on social media, they're stuck in Missouri
Because of snow?
because of weather. So
Yeah.
that's one thing that's a little bit intriguing to me is that they're not going to get, assuming they haven't left yet, which LeBaron's not giving, a play-by-play update by any means. He just posted a video and then was replying to comments saying, "Yeah, because of weather, we haven't left." So I think that that's one interesting thing. But like you said, Lamont Butler, will he play? Will he not? He scored 17 last time that Alabama and Kentucky played, and leads the team in assists and in steals. So defensively, steals. These two teams are allowed the most points per game in the SEC. Alabama allows the most. Kentucky is right there at 15th in the conference. And we saw that last game. It was a shootout. It was a track meet last time that these two teams played. And Alabama, ended up pulling off the win there. Them and Arkansas are the only two SEC teams that have beat Kentucky in on their home court. Four of their six conference losses have come on the road. So that is something that should give Alabama fans, a little bit of hope. I mean, I don't think they
Yeah.
need a ton coming into this game, but that's something that should make you feel better.
Yeah.
Um,
The
and
team did get out of Missouri, by the way. I
they
did
did.
check what you said that. So they're
Okay.
home safely,
Okay,
uh,
good.
tucked into their beds.
Okay, good.
Like,
Because that's well, when I saw that, I was like, I mean, tomorrow's Friday and they
yeah.
play on Saturday. And it's not like they're
Yeah.
playing at an 8 o'clock tip off, but okay. Team's home, disregard. But Alabama cannot get off to a slow start again.
Yeah.
They
So, oof, yes.
they
Preach.
they need to score. Maybe they need to score the first points. If they
Yeah.
don't score the first points, they need to score on their first offensive possession. Something else that I found very interesting was that Grant Nelson had a season high 25 points on the road when they played Kentucky on the road. Since then he has not scored more than 16. So he was big offensively, and that's kind of lacked, like you mentioned earlier. He's been a little quiet on the offensive side of the court lately. So I think that
Didn't
he's
didn't
letting,
even didn't even attempt a three in the loss at Missouri. He only shot the ball 5 times, but 0 3-point shots. So he's lost his confidence with his outside shot, not even taking them.
yeah, that is something that would be concerning to me. But then again, if Lamont Butler isn't playing, I think that's obviously going to be beneficial for Alabama. And LeBaron Philon was also productive offensively, and he went through a little bit of that scoring drought, but he scored in double figures in all of Alabama's last three games. So it seems like he's getting his shot back, and probably his confidence as well after, a couple tough games offensively. So I think LeBaron and Grant are going to be two that I'm keeping my eye on, especially Grant, because
Yep.
he showed up big time in that game, and ever since then he's fallen off a little bit. I mean, he's had a number of 15-point games, but he has not exceeded the 16-point mark since their trip to
Yep.
Lexington.
Turnovers had 10 in the first half and
Yep.
helped that hole, gave up 15 points off of that. But just finishing at the rim, and if they can't let you, if you can't get a 3-point shot and they're letting you get to the rim, you got to be able to finish. You got to be physical, and everybody has to step up their game against Kentucky. Our final thought here on the basketball show today is the SEC bubble trouble. You will agree with me. I know you will because we talk about it frequently. Auburn, these are locks for the NCAA tournament. Auburn, Florida, Alabama, Tennessee, A&M, I don't know why I went to this hand, A&M, Missouri, Kentucky, Mississippi State, and Ole Miss. So there's 9 that are locks. Texas and Vandy next. I feel like those two will get in, Texas and Vandy. But I no longer feel like we necessarily are going to break the record because I'm wondering about Oklahoma and Arkansas. If one of them can get in to break the record, I don't think both of them will get in to give us the 13 we've been dreaming about all year. And Georgia, to me, is out. LSU is done. South Carolina is done. So 11 sort of is the number I'm settling on now. What about you on this? Is the SEC got some bubble trouble? Maybe even with Texas and Vandy, but Oklahoma and Arkansas specifically?
I mean, it's crazy because please correct me if I'm wrong, but South Carolina, was it South Carolina that entered conference play with they're on a 13 game losing streak obviously because they're 0 and 13 in the conference. So they they entered conference play 10 and 3. So it's just crazy that these teams that had a good non-conference record, again, everyone's strength of schedule is different, but they've kind of fallen off. And I think in terms of Arkansas, I think this game on Wednesday night, that was a massive opportunity for them to add a marquee win to their resume in
Yep.
terms of having an opportunity to beat Auburn at home.
Yeah, that would have
But
put them in. That would have put them in the tournament, I think.
yeah, and Cal, y'all played the cut today and talked about it on the next round, and he was asked about it, and he basically said every game is an NCAA tournament game. And I can't remember which one of y'all said you're not doing a very good job of campaigning for your team right now because y'all are losing all
Yeah.
of the games that you're saying are NCAA tournament games. So they are. I agree that that would have put them in. That would have been, a massive green check on their resume when it comes to the committee looking over the SEC teams. I agree that there's the history of or the record of teams from a conference getting in. I don't know that the SEC will hold that after this season because a lot of teams it hasn't been super balanced in terms of losses. And I don't want to sound like the people that are saying that the SEC's 500 since conference play started, but for example, South Carolina, they haven't done anything for themselves once conference
That's
play
right.
started. LSU's kind of in the same boat. So the teams that have dropped off have dropped off a cliff. And it's kind of there's a pretty big gap between the top, two-thirds and then the bottom third of the conference. So those teams that are in the bottom third of the conference were the ones that would have put the SEC, over the edge to potentially break that record. And they can't seem to win a game.
Big games coming up on Saturday, though. That includes the two. We'll be at separate journeys for us on Saturday. I'll be in Tuscaloosa for Kentucky and Alabama. T will be down at Auburn, Georgia and Auburn. A sweet little 3 o'clock tip for you. All right, that's the basketball show. Getting ready for another big weekend. Sadly, T, we don't have many more of these
Stop.
left.
Don't do this.
Oh, I'm just saying, we just have two more Saturdays of after this one, two more Saturdays. So
Okay.
we're winding down on what has been I mean, I feel it. It's been a lot. Every time we log on, I'm like, man, we do a lot of these shows, but it is so much fun. I hope you guys have not gotten tired of it yet. We haven't got tired of doing them. It is so much fun, and we appreciate you guys so much. Thumbs up, like us, comment, and don't forget live after the games. Each one of them, when they conclude, will be live separate shows for Auburn and Alabama on Saturday, and then we'll be back Monday morning with a mailbag version. So watch the alerts. You guys were fantastic with the mailbag last week with some great questions, and we appreciate you so much. For Little T, I'm Jim, and that's the basketball show.